The wind howled across the frozen wasteland like a wounded beast. Marcus pressed himself deeper into the corner of the abandoned warehouse, his thin jacket doing almost nothing against the bitter cold. His fingers had gone numb an hour ago. Now, he couldn't even feel his toes. The boy was 10 years old, though he looked younger. Hunger had a way of making children shrink into themselves. His dark hair was matted with frost, and his lips had turned an alarming shade of blue. But Marcus didn't cry. He had learned 6 months ago that crying didn't help anything. 6 months. That's how long it had been since the mine collapsed, since his mother and father had gone to work and never came home. The colonial authorities on Frosthaven had given him exactly 2 weeks in a temporary shelter before telling him they had no more resources. There were too many orphans, too many accidents, not enough food or space or people who cared. So Marcus had learned to survive on his own. He stole scraps from behind the food dispensaries. He hid in abandoned buildings when the gangs came through. He avoided the checkpoint guards who would beat street children for sport. He became invisible, a ghost haunting the edges of the colony. But tonight was different. Tonight, the worst blizzard in 20 years had descended on Frosthaven like a curse. The colony had sealed its main gates, keeping everyone inside the protected dome. Everyone except the ones outside, the forgotten ones. Marcus had tried to sneak into the emergency food distribution center. Just one meal, one warm bowl of protein paste. But the guards had chased him out with shock sticks, laughing as he stumbled into the snow. One of them had kicked him hard in the ribs. Marcus had run until he couldn't run anymore. Now he sat in the darkness of the warehouse, feeling the cold creeping into his bones. The wind found every crack in the walls, every gap in his clothing. His breath came in short gasps that created tiny clouds of vapor in the freezing air. Marcus knew he was dying. He had seen enough death on Frosthaven to recognize it. The cold was pulling him down into sleep, and he knew if he closed his eyes, he wouldn't open them again. For the first time in 6 months, tears began to roll down his cheeks. They froze almost instantly, creating tiny crystals of ice on his skin. He wasn't crying from the pain or the cold. He was crying because he was alone, completely and utterly alone in the entire universe. "I just wanted someone to care," he whispered to the empty darkness. Just one person. The tears came harder now, his small body shaking with sobs. He had been so strong for so long. But he was just a child, just a small boy who wanted his parents back, who wanted a warm bed and hot food, and someone to tell him everything would be okay. Marcus felt his eyes growing heavy. The cold didn't hurt anymore. That was bad, he knew. That meant the end was close. He slumped sideways against the wall, too weak to sit up any longer. Through his blurred vision, he thought he saw a light outside, a strange blue glow cutting through the blizzard. He blinked slowly, trying to focus. The light was getting brighter, coming closer. A shadow passed overhead, so massive it blocked out the swirling snow. Marcus's fading mind couldn't make sense of what he was seeing. It looked like something from the old Earth legends his mother used to tell him. Something with wings and scales and eyes that glowed like stars. The wall of the warehouse exploded inward in a shower of ice and metal. But there was no violence in it, no destruction. It simply opened, as if something had gently pushed it aside. Through the opening came a creature that made Marcus forget about the cold, forget about dying, forget about everything. It was a dragon, not a monster, not something to fear. A dragon made of crystal and starlight, with scales that shimmered in colors Marcus had never seen before. It moved with impossible grace for something so large, flowing like water, like music given form. The dragon lowered its massive head and looked directly at Marcus with eyes that held more kindness than the boy had seen in 6 months. A voice spoke in his mind, not words exactly, but feelings, understanding, warmth. "Little one," the voice said, "your tears called me across the stars." Marcus tried to speak, but couldn't. His vision was going dark. The last thing he felt was a gentle force lifting him from the ground, warm despite the cold, safe despite the storm. Then consciousness left him. The dragon called Syrax carried the dying boy upward into the blizzard, into the sky, into the stars beyond. Marcus opened his eyes to warmth. Real warmth. Not the desperate heat of a failing colony heater, but a gentle, all-encompassing comfort that seemed to come from everywhere at once. He blinked slowly, his mind struggling to remember where he was and how he had gotten here. The last thing he recalled was the cold, the warehouse, the tears freezing on his face. And then something impossible. He sat up quickly, his heart pounding. The room around him was like nothing he had ever seen. The walls seemed alive, pulsing with soft blue and green light. They curved organically, as if they had been grown rather than built. Through a transparent section above him, Marcus could see stars. Millions of them, brighter and more numerous than he had ever imagined possible. "You are awake," a voice said inside his head. Marcus jumped, looking around frantically. "Do not be afraid, little one. I am here." The dragon emerged from an opening in the wall, moving with that same impossible grace Marcus vaguely remembered. In the soft light of the chamber, it was even more beautiful than before. Its scales reflected the starlight, creating patterns that seemed to dance across its crystalline body. Marcus pressed himself against the wall, his survival instincts screaming danger even as something deeper inside him felt only calm. What are you?" he whispered. "I am Syrax," the voice said in his mind, gentle as a summer breeze. "I am of the Drakthar, the old ones who travel between the stars. And you, Marcus, are very far from home." "How do you know my name?" Marcus asked, his voice shaking. "I know many things about you," Syrax replied, settling onto the floor with a sound like wind chimes. "I know that you lost your parents in the mines. I know that you survived alone for many months. I know that when you cried in the snow, your heart sang a song so pure and strong that I heard it from beyond your world." Marcus touched his face, remembering the tears. "I don't understand." "Your people are young in the great community of space," Syrax explained. "But you possess something rare. We call a heart fire. It is the ability to feel deeply, to suffer greatly, and yet to remain kind. To remain yourself. Not all beings have this gift. Not all who have it let it grow strong." The boy looked down at his hands. They were clean now, and the cuts and bruises he had carried for weeks were healed. "You saved my life." "Yes," Syrax said simply. "But I did not save you only to return you to that frozen world. I offer you a choice, Marcus of Frosthaven. You may return if you wish. I will make sure you are cared for. Or—" the dragon's eyes seemed to glow brighter. "You may stay with me, become my apprentice, learn the ways of the Drakthar, and see wonders beyond your imagination." Marcus felt tears threatening again, but these were different. "I have nothing to go back to." "That is not true," Syrax said gently. "You have yourself, your strength, your heart fire. These things are worth more than you know. But I understand your meaning. The question is, what do you wish to become?" Marcus thought about Frosthaven, the cold, the hunger, the guards who kicked children and laughed, the authorities who looked at orphans like problems to be solved. He thought about his parents, who would never want to give up, to become hard and cruel like the world around him. "I want to learn," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger. "I want to understand. Why did you really save me? Out of everyone in the galaxy, why a boy from a failing colony?" Syrax made a sound that might have been laughter, though it felt like warm sunshine in Marcus's mind. "Because your people fascinate us, young Marcus. Humans are feared by many species in the galaxy. They say you are too adaptable, too stubborn, too willing to survive at any cost. They say you change too quickly and forgive too slowly. But I see something else." "What do you see?" Marcus asked. "I see a species that feels everything intensely. Pain and joy, loss and hope. You break easily, but you heal stronger. You are knocked down, but you stand back up. And most importantly, you can suffer without becoming cruel. That is rare in the universe. That is precious." Marcus stood up on shaky legs and walked to the transparent wall. Outside, space stretched forever in all directions. Somewhere out there was Frosthaven, but it seemed impossibly far away now. A different life, a different Marcus. "Teach me," he said quietly. "Then we begin," Syrax replied. "First, You must learn to listen not with your ears, but with your mind. Close your eyes, Marcus. Feel the ship around you. It is alive in its own way. It is part of me, and now it will learn to be part of you. Marcus closed his eyes. At first, he felt nothing. Then, slowly, he began to sense something. A rhythm, a pulse, like a heartbeat, but vast and ancient and strange. The ship was breathing, living, welcoming him. Good. Syrax's voice whispered in his mind. Very good. You learn quickly. This is the first lesson. Everything is connected. You, me, this ship, the stars themselves. When you understand this, you understand everything. Marcus opened his eyes and smiled for the first time in 6 months. He was home. 6 years had changed Marcus in ways he never imagined possible. The scrawny 10-year-old, who nearly froze to death, was gone. In his place stood a young man of 16, lean and strong, with eyes that had seen wonders most humans would never know. He moved through the living ship with confidence now, his mind connected to its systems as naturally as breathing. Syrax had taught him well. Marcus could speak with his mind to dozens of alien species. He understood star navigation and ancient technologies. He had learned that strength without wisdom was just violence, and power without compassion was just cruelty. The Drakthar had few rules, but these were absolute. Marcus was running diagnostics on the sensor array when the ship suddenly shuddered. Every screen blazed red with emergency alerts. His heart jumped into his throat. "Syrax!" he called out, both with his voice and his mind. The dragon appeared instantly, scales flashing with agitation. A distress signal. Very close. Multiple ships under attack. Marcus pulled up the long-range sensors. What he saw made his blood run cold. A convoy of civilian vessels, maybe 20 ships of different designs, were being swarmed by something that looked like a nightmare made real. Hundreds of smaller craft moving in perfect coordination, tearing into the convoy's shields like piranha. "The crash," Syrax said, his mental voice heavy with anger. "The swarm that devours worlds." Marcus had heard stories about the crash, an insectoid species that operated as one massive hive mind, consuming everything in their path. Entire planets had gone silent after they passed through. They didn't negotiate. They didn't stop. They just consumed. "We have to help them," Marcus said, already plotting an intercept course. One dragon and one human against a swarm of thousands? Syrax said, but Marcus could feel the dragon was already preparing for battle. "They will overwhelm us." "Maybe," Marcus said, studying the attack patterns on a screen. His human mind worked differently than the ancient dragons, seeing connections and possibilities that came from growing up fighting for survival. Or maybe we're thinking about this wrong. He zoomed in on the Kresh movements. They attacked in perfect waves, each group supporting the others, moving like a single organism, which meant they thought like a single organism. "Syrax, can you create light displays?" Really bright ones, multiple colors, changing rapidly. The dragon's confusion rippled through their mental link. "Yes, but how does this help?" Marcus grinned, the expression fierce and determined. "Because hive minds are amazing at coordination, but terrible at handling contradictory information. If they all share one consciousness, they all see what one sees. We're going to give them a really bad headache." They dropped out of faster-than-light travel, right in the middle of the battle. The convoy ships were battered, shields failing. Marcus could see escape pods launching from a vessel that was breaking apart. Families inside. Children, just like he had been once, helpless and afraid. "Now!" Marcus shouted. Syrax unleashed a display of light that would have been beautiful if it wasn't being used as a weapon. Brilliant colors exploded across space, strobing and pulsing in patterns that made even Marcus's eyes hurt. But more importantly, the patterns were designed to overload insect visual processing. Every Kresh in the swarm saw it simultaneously through their shared consciousness. The effect was immediate. The coordinated attack fell apart as thousands of Kresh ships suddenly lost synchronization. Some stopped dead in space. Others spun wildly. A few even collided with each other. "Marcus, you clever little human." Syrax's delight sang through their bond. "Not done yet. Marcus said. He activated the ship's communication array and began broadcasting false signals across every frequency the Kresh used. Fleet positions that didn't exist. Attack orders that contradicted each other. Danger warnings from every direction at once. The hive mind tried to process it all at once and simply couldn't. The Kresh began retreating, their ships fleeing in disarray, trying to escape the sensory chaos Marcus had created. Within minutes, the swarm was gone. The battered convoy hung in space, shields flickering but intact. Marcus collapsed back in his seat, exhausted but triumphant. "Did we just win a battle without firing a single shot?" he asked. "We did," Syrax confirmed, his voice filled with pride. "You fought with wisdom, not violence. The Drakthar way, but also the human way. No other species would have thought of such a solution." The communication panel lit up. 5 different alien species from the convoy were trying to contact them at once. Marcus opened the channels to a chorus of grateful voices, some speaking languages he knew, others that his translation systems had to work to understand. A Velithian captain, her blue skin marked with stress patterns, appeared on screen. "Who are you? You saved us all. We thought we were dead." Marcus glanced at Syrax, then back at the screen. "Just someone who knows what it's like to need help and have no one answer. We couldn't let that happen to you." Another voice joined in, this one from a species Marcus didn't recognize. "The human who fights with dragon wisdom. We will remember this. All our worlds will hear it this day." After the convoy continued on their way, Marcus sat quietly, watching the stars. Syrax settled beside him, a comfortable presence in both body and mind. "You saved hundreds today," the dragon said. "Families, children, you gave them hope." Marcus thought about that warehouse on Frosthaven. The cold, the loneliness, the tears. "Someone once gave me hope when I had none. I'm just passing it forward. This is what Heartfire truly means," Syrax said softly. "You have become what I knew you could be." The message came through on an old emergency frequency Marcus had almost forgotten existed. It was garbled and weak, but the words were clear enough to make his heart sink. Frosthaven was dying. The corporations that funded the colony were pulling out. Without supplies, without support, thousands would perish when winter came. Marcus stared at the message for a long time. Part of him wanted to delete it and move on. Frosthaven had given him nothing but pain. The colony had left him to freeze in the snow like garbage. Why should he care what happened to them now? But he did care. That was the problem with having Heartfire, as Syrax called it. You couldn't just turn it off when it was inconvenient. "We should go," Marcus said quietly. Syrax had been listening to his thoughts. "As always. You do not owe them anything, young friend. They abandoned you." "I know," Marcus said, "but there are kids there now just like I was. Orphans. Forgotten. And when winter comes, they'll freeze just like I almost did. I can't let that happen." The dragon was silent for a moment. Then his warmth flooded through their mental connection. "Then we go. But this time, you do not arrive as a helpless child. You arrive as something more." The journey to Frosthaven took 3 days. Marcus spent most of it remembering. The cold, the hunger, his parents' laughter before the mine collapse, the guards who kicked him, the warehouse where he had waited to die. Each memory was a scar, but also a reminder of how far he had come. When they dropped out of faster-than-light travel above Frosthaven, Marcus was shocked by how small it looked. In his memories, the colony had been huge, imposing. Now it was just a struggling dome on a frozen world, looking fragile and alone. "Take us down near the main gate," Marcus said. "I want them to see us coming." Syrax descended slowly, deliberately. The living ship was impossible to miss. Every sensor in the colony would be screaming alerts. Marcus could imagine the panic. Nothing this large had ever approached Frosthaven before. They landed in the snow outside the main gate with surprising gentleness. Marcus stood up, pulling on the environment suit Syrax had made for him. It was unlike anything from Frosthaven, woven with technology that kept him warm even in the brutal cold. "Ready?" Syrax asked. "No," Marcus admitted, "but let's do it anyway." The gate was sealed tight when they approached. Marcus could see weapons being aimed at them from the walls. He raised his hands peacefully and activated the external speakers. My name is Marcus Chun. I was born in this colony. I'm here to help. There was a long silence. Then a crackling voice came over the speakers. Marcus Chun died 6 years ago. Froze to death in the winter of 2319. Who are you really? Marcus felt a bitter laugh escape him. I didn't die, but I nearly did. You left me outside to freeze. You left a lot of kids outside to freeze. Another long pause. Then, slowly, the gate began to open. A woman in a military uniform stood there, flanked by nervous guards. Her face was older, harder than Marcus remembered, but he recognized her. Commander Chun, distant relation to his father, though she had never acknowledged it. It's really you, she whispered, staring at him. You're alive, and you're with what is that thing? Sirax emerged from the ship behind Marcus, his crystalline form catching the weak sunlight and throwing rainbow patterns across the snow. Several guards actually dropped their weapons in fear. This is Sirax, Marcus said calmly. He's my friend. He's the reason I'm alive. And he's here to help save this colony, if you'll let us. Commander Chen's eyes were wide with disbelief. How? The corporations won't send supplies anymore. We're on our own. In 3 months, our reserves run out. When winter comes... I know, Marcus interrupted. I've been through Frosthaven winter before. I remember exactly what it's like to be left in the cold. He let the words hang in the air for a moment. But I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because there are children in this colony who don't deserve to suffer for adult failures. What can you possibly do? The commander asked, her voice breaking slightly. We've tried everything. The galaxy doesn't care about a failing colony on the edge of nowhere. Marcus smiled, and it was a smile of someone who had seen things these colonists couldn't imagine. The galaxy is bigger than you think, and I've made some friends out there. Remember that convoy we saved from the Kresh swarm? It's been all over the news feeds. 5 different species, all grateful, all willing to help. He pulled out a data pad and showed her the communications he had received. Trade agreements, offers of supplies, technology exchanges. The refugees he had saved wanted to establish routes through this sector. They needed a waypoint, a safe harbor. Frosthaven could be that place. But there's more, Marcus continued. The Drakthar have agreed to share terraforming knowledge. In 5 years, this world could be genuinely habitable, not just survivable. Frosthaven could become something important, a place where different species work together. A beacon, not a forgotten outpost. Commander Chin stared at the data pad, tears forming in her eyes. Why? Why would you help us after what we did to you? Marcus looked back at Sirax, then at the colony walls, then at the snow where he had once laid dying. Because I learned something out there among the stars. Humans have a choice. We can let our suffering make us cruel, or we can let it make us kind. I choose kind. He stepped closer to the commander. But I have conditions. Every orphan in this colony gets care. Real care, education, training, a future. No more children freezing in warehouses. No more forgotten kids. That's my price. The commander nodded slowly, a smile breaking through her tears. Deal. Welcome home, Marcus. Marcus looked at the colony, at Sirax, at the stars above. Yeah, he said softly. Welcome home. 1 year had transformed Frosthaven into something Marcus barely recognized. The struggling colony was now a thriving hub where ships from a dozen different species arrived daily. The old warehouse where Marcus had nearly died was now a school. Children of multiple species learned together in classrooms that hummed with possibility instead of despair. Marcus stood at the window of what had become his office, watching young humans practice telepathy exercises with Lithian instructors. A small Draxian child, barely 5 years old, laughed as she made a training sphere float through the air. 2 human orphans helped a wounded Kresh worker repair a solar panel, showing the gentleness that made humanity special. They call it a Heartfire Academy now. Every child who came here, regardless of species, learned that strength meant nothing without compassion, that survival was important. But so was kindness. that the scars they carried could become sources of wisdom instead of bitterness. "You have done well," Sirac said, materializing beside him. Even after 7 years together, the dragon's sudden appearances still made Marcus jump slightly. "We've done well," Marcus corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Before Sirac could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Marcus's data pad exploded with emergency messages. His blood went cold as he read the reports. A Kresh invasion fleet, massive, heading straight for the sector. The Galactic Council had been debating what to do for 3 days while the swarm got closer. Multiple species argued about jurisdiction, about who should lead the defense, about old grudges and ancient treaties. They were going to lose the war through politics and pride. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked, his mind already racing. "For days until they reach the nearest inhabited systems," Sirac replied. 2 weeks until they reach us." Marcus pulled up the tactical displays. The Kresh fleet was enormous. Thousands of ships moving in perfect coordination. Traditional military responses had failed against them for months. Species fought them separately, each trying to protect only their own territory, and the swarm simply overwhelmed them one by one. "We need a coalition," Marcus said suddenly. "Multiple species working together. Human creativity, Drakthar power, Volithian shields, Draxian weapon systems. Everything combined." "The Council will never agree," Sirac said gently. "They have been trying to form such an alliance for months. Too much distrust. Too much history." "Then we don't ask the Council," Marcus said, a plan forming in his mind. "We ask the people we've helped. The refugees, the traders, the families who come here. We build our own fleet." Over the next 2 days, Marcus worked without sleep. He sent messages to every contact he had made over the years. The convoy they had saved. The species who traded at Heartfire Station. Even individual ship captains who had heard stories of the human boy and his dragon friend. The response was overwhelming. Ships began arriving from across the sector. Not military vessels, but traders, explorers. Families who remembered being helped when no one else cared. They came because Marcus had shown them something rare in the galaxy. Genuine cooperation between species. But Marcus had one more idea, one that everyone said was impossible. He had been studying captured Kresh ships for months, learning their technology, understanding their hive mind, and he had discovered something that changed everything. The Kresh weren't evil. They were controlled. An ancient parasite had infected their queen mind centuries ago, driving them to endless consumption. "If we can reach the queen and remove the parasite," Marcus explained to his assembled fleet, "the Kresh can be freed. They can become what they were meant to be." "You want to save the enemy?" a Draxian captain asked in disbelief. "They have destroyed worlds." "They're victims too," Marcus insisted. "And humanity doesn't win by becoming like our enemies. We win by being better." The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Marcus's coalition fought not to destroy, but to create an opening. Human pilots used deception and misdirection. Draxian weapons disabled rather than killed. Volithian shields protected everyone, not just their own species. And Sirac led them all, a dragon of starlight showing the way. Marcus himself piloted a small ship into the heart of the swarm, protected by the combined shields of 20 different vessels. He reached the queen ship, surrounded by thousands of Kresh defenders. His heart hammered in his chest. But he thought about that warehouse, about being 10 years old and freezing in the snow, about how one act of kindness had changed everything. Using technology Sirac had taught him, Marcus sent a telepathic message directly into the queen mind. Not words, but feelings, understanding, compassion, an offer of help instead of violence. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then the Kresh fleet stopped attacking. Simply stopped, hanging motionless in space. Marcus entered the queen ship alone. What he found was a creature in agony, ancient and tired, controlled by a writhing mass of parasitic technology that had merged with her nervous system centuries ago. She couldn't speak, couldn't stop the killing, could only watch in horror as her children were forced to consume everything they touched. "I understand," Marcus whispered, approaching carefully. "I know what it's like to be trapped, to be helpless. But you're not alone anymore. Using tools designed by the greatest minds of a dozen species, Marcus carefully removed the parasite. It took 6 hours. His hands shook with exhaustion. But when the last piece was extracted, the Queen Mind's eyes cleared for the first time in generations. The change rippled through the entire swarm instantly. Millions of Kresh across the sector stopped their attacks. Confusion, and then relief flooding their shared consciousness. They were free. 3 months later, Marcus stood on the hill overlooking Heartfire Station, with Syrax beside him. The station had grown even larger. Kresh workers now help with construction, their efficiency making projects move 3 times faster. The Galactic Council, embarrassed by how a 17-year-old human had accomplished what they couldn't, had officially recognized the coalition. "You changed the galaxy," Syrax said quietly. One human boy who refused to let suffering make him cruel. Marcus smiled, watching ships come and go from 100 different worlds. He thought about that night in the snow, about the tears freezing on his face, about thinking he would die alone and forgotten. You know what the best part is? Marcus asked. Every day, new orphans arrive here. Lost kids from every corner of space. And every single one of them learns the same thing I did. That pain doesn't have to define you. That kindness is strength. That one person can make a difference. A young human girl, maybe 9 years old, ran up the hill toward them. She had arrived last week from a mining colony. Her parents lost in an accident. She had been angry, bitter, lashing out at everyone. But today she was smiling. Marcus, I did it. I talked to the creche teacher with my mind. She said I'm really good at it. Marcus knelt down to her level. That's amazing. I knew you could do it. Will I be like you someday? The girl asked, her eyes shining with hope. Will I get to help people? Marcus looked at Syrax, then back at the girl. You already are helping people. Every time you choose to be kind instead of angry. Every time you lift someone else up. That's what Heartfire means. The girl hugged him quickly, then ran back down the hill to tell her friends. Syrax's warmth filled Marcus's mind. She will do great things. They all will, Marcus agreed. That's the thing about humans. We fall down. We get hurt. We cry in the snow. But then we get back up. And we make sure no one else has to cry alone. He looked up at the stars, at the endless possibilities stretching across the galaxy. Somewhere out there, more people needed help. More orphans needed hope. More species needed to learn that cooperation was stronger than conflict. The human boy who had been lifted from the snow now lifted others toward the stars. And the legacy of Heartfire would burn bright for generations to come.